Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to the Forever Change podcast. So glad that you're with us. My name is Nick, here as always with the wonderful Mrs. Hurst, aka Chelsea, aka Baby Mama, aka Hudson's Mama, aka One Love. Anyways,
Jeez,
here
it's a
today,
lot.
to talk about not wasting your season of singleness.
Yes.
And this is honestly an area that I don't know about you, but this is one area that I wouldn't say that I have like regrets in. I just have things that I wish I would have done differently, but they're not like to the degree that I would call them a regret. It's just like,
Yeah.
yeah, if I knew what I know now, if I knew then what I know now, kind of like the old song,
Yeah, I was about to sing it.
I would have done that.
Mm.
And so I think a lot of times people in their season of singleness are just like so busy looking forward to the future as to what dating will be like, or what being engaged will be like, or what being married is going to be like, and they begin playing out all these scenarios in their mind of what the future is going to hold, so much so that they miss out on what is right in front of them.
Yeah. And so I would love for us to talk about a story from our singleness to kind of open us up.
Yeah.
I don't know what yours was like. I know we've talked a little bit about that season because we had met at 18 and 19.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
18
I
and 19.
just turned 19. Wait.
It doesn't matter. Around then.
Yeah, somewhere in that
So
era.
before we met, I was in another relationship that had just gone over, I think, a month before we had met. And so right off the bat, I was like, dude, I cannot get another relationship. You and me, just going to be friends. So right off the bat, we friend zoned. Well, I friend zoned
you friends on me.
But
that didn't work out too well.
I will say, I wish, like, I just recall always desiring to be in a relationship, like even in high school and middle school. And none of mine were actually ever really serious. I think until I met you, like you were like my first very serious relationship where I was like, man, this is going to be for marriage. Because I think we knew right off the bat that.
Yeah, girl. I wasn't playing no games.
But you had a longer season of singleness than I did.
I did, yeah.
And
probably a couple years.
I just wish I would have not just lightly dated a bunch of people. I didn't date a bunch of people, but a handful of people. And I think I was really just trying to figure out like the types of people that I liked. But I truly believe some of the best ways to get to know other people is in a group context of like how they, treat other people. And not everything has to be like romantic when you're early on and getting to know somebody. So I guess I could share like a story that I find funny. One of my closest friends, her name's Lydia. She is so fun to hang out with. I actually met her at church, but she's from like a really close school to mine. We didn't go to school together or anything, but she thought it would just be funny and so fun to be like sister-in-laws. So she was like, you should totally date my brother. And I did. I was like, that's a really great idea.
Wow, this is a good plan. Let's do it.
But like, I don't think I ever had the intentions to just date her brother to potentially be in the family. But I mean, I really enjoyed our friendship with one another. And I was like, you know what? Your brother is cute. I mean, he's younger than me, but let's try this whole dating thing. So we dated for like a week, but then we realized we were not. The
fellowship wasn't going to work.
Fellowship was not happening. It was not. We were not the right people for each other. But yeah, he was such a bro. I don't know if you ever meet like a person.
He was a dude.
That
yeah.
He was just a great friend to just have laughs with, But you would.
Those people are awesome.
They're great.
We need those people.
They're great. And I think there's a lot of potential there for, somebody else to marry him, but not me, because I was like, you're just such a bro. I just can't see you in that way. And And maybe it's because his sister was like my best friend. That probably played into it. But
I'm sure it did.
yeah, so that's my little story. Do you have any?
No. Anyways, on to the content. No, but for real, I mean, no, not really.
You
Like, I don't
don't?
have like any crazy, like goofy stories. Honestly, like my dating life was like super boring,
Well, maybe
prior
in your
to,
singleness, because you were single for a while.
yeah,
Um, I know that you would do a lot of crazy things. Like, let's be honest, you built race engines.
yeah,
Nobody really knows that about
that
you.
was fun. Had a blast. Uh, blew up some stuff, and it was cool and neat and all. But yeah, I mean, I think that looking back, some of the things I wish I would have done more of was,
Hmm.
I think I wish I, yeah, I wish I would have spent more time. Um, it sounds so cliche because like we're Christians, this is a Christian podcast, and I was doing it a lot, but I wish I would have spent even more time like really cultivating my relationship with the Lord. I wish I would have built friendships outside of just the normal groups that I hung around. So whether that was
Hmm.
race car drivers, whether that was people at church,
That
whether
sounds
that
so
was,
funny.
yeah, what, yeah,
Whether it was race
um,
car drivers.
whether it was, just the standard people. Like I wish I would have ventured outside of that standard group of people that I spent time around and developed relationships with others. And I just don't think I did enough of that. And I think that the big thing that I probably did way too much of was just like surveying the land of like trying to find and scope out that one right gal, which is you. But I think that I would do that so much that it detracted from what was right in front of me
Mm.
and what I could have been faithful with. So as far as like a bunch of silly stories and stuff, like yeah, I did a lot of really cool stuff and I had a lot of neat and interesting experiences. But aside from that, I definitely do have things that I wish I would have done differently, and those are definitely some of those
In that
things.
area.
And then I think that there's this other underlying factor that happens so much in singleness, and I think it's happened to me. I know it's happened to you, but I'm just messing with you.
Mm.
But I think it happens to a lot of people for real, and that's that we have to start trying to like prove ourselves or make ourselves like seem cooler or better or whatever to other people, so that we'll maybe attract someone. And I just don't think that that is like, in fact, one of the things that I've had to spend so much time in marriage doing is kind of coming out of that shell of feeling like I always have to prove myself or I always have to
Mm.
be somebody or act like somebody I'm not, so that other people will like me. And yeah, I wish I would have like just fully embraced me for who I was and realized that like I in and of myself was enough
You were enough. Yeah.
and not have to like put on or pretend to be someone that I wasn't.
Wow. Yeah, that's very huge. I think you don't even realize that you're doing that sometimes. I think you get in such a pattern and singleness of like it feels exciting sometimes to try to impress somebody or to make yourself known in some way, which I think is it's okay to kind of
Yeah, put yourself out there,
yeah.
but don't go in like $300 or $400 of credit card debt to buy an outfit to like impress somebody. Like that,
Right.
like doing stuff like that. And honestly, like I can't say I ever did that, but I would do stuff similar to that. And
Mhm.
maybe it wasn't $300 or $400, but maybe it was 150 that I didn't have. And I like
Yeah.
wanted to look cute for, someone or what I like just doing silly stuff like that that really didn't move the needle toward the end goal,
Mm.
and just making like dumb decisions that would set me back, maybe not very much, but nonetheless, it moved me in the direction that I didn't want to go versus the direction that I did want to go and was trying to go. And
Yeah.
so I think just doing silly and kind of, I won't say it's dumb, um, but I would
It's
just
not
more so say
meaningful.
it's not really necessary. It's not
Right.
dumb. I'm not gonna call that a dumb thing because there's a lot of dumb things. I don't think that's a dumb thing, but it's just not necessary. You just don't need to do it.
Yeah.
And there's better things that you can be doing with your time.
Right. And one of my regrets, I would say, is just taking dating so lightly. Like, I allowed myself to be emotionally invested very quickly into relationships. And I think it's almost like a default sometimes, at least from my circle of friends, to just envision yourself and your future with a person that you're with.
Yeah. Ooh, that's
Um,
good.
And sometimes getting into that headspace too quickly allows for you to create this make-believe person in your mind that isn't necessarily there, but you see potential, so you
Mm.
keep pursuing the relationship. But you can't create a good relationship out of potential.
Yeah.
You have to create a great relationship out of what's already there,
Yeah.
because whatever is already there is either going to grow or it's going to, like, that's why I think it's so important that in being a Christian, you find somebody to partner with lifelong. If you're going to get married, that is another Christian, because it is so much easier to get set back in what you believe rather than you encouraging and dragging that person along into what you believe. This podcast is in partnership with BetterHelp. Is there something preventing you from achieving your goals or seeing life the way you'd like to? Nick and I have used BetterHelp counseling in our marriage and individually over the years, and we've seen such a tremendous difference in the way we communicate, how we view parenting, and even individually feeling healthier in every area of our life. BetterHelp will assess your needs and match you with your own licensed professional therapist. You'll be matched with a therapist in under 48 hours. And you can log into your account anytime and send a message to your therapist. You'll get timely and thoughtful responses. Plus, you can schedule weekly video or phone sessions so you won't ever have to sit in an uncomfortable waiting room. BetterHelp is committed to facilitating great therapeutic matches so they can make it easy and free to change therapists if needed. We've actually done this before, and it was so easy to do, and it's more affordable than traditional offline therapy, and financial aid is available. So if you guys want to get 10% off your first month at BetterHelp, you can go to betterhelp.com/Hurst. Again, that's betterhelp.com/HURST.
Yeah, you can't work with what might be or what there's, the possibility of being. You got to work with, I mean, as the old saying goes, you got to work with what you got.
Yeah,
And it's really important to take a good long look, not only at someone else and for who they are and their character, but also for yourself.
right. And I want to speak to the women for a second, because I think it's so easy for us to get in that frame of mind where we envision ourselves with that person that we're dating, or we are in our mind pursuing. Maybe we're just friends and we're hanging out in group atmospheres or whatever. It's so easy to see what your future kids could be like and what you'd be like married, and just kind of create this fantasy in your mind. But what is truly there? Like, what is their character? How do
Yeah.
they treat you? Are
Got to be
they
objective.
pursuing you, or are you kind of in your own head with this? It's just, there's two different things at play here. It's like the reality versus the imaginary. And I think it's so easy to kind of go into your own mind of just kind of creating this scenario that's not there.
Yeah.
But in order to get back to the ground level of reality and asking God, hey, search my heart, because I don't know my intentions sometimes, and I would like to get into the right relationship if that's what you have for me. But sometimes my emotions and my thoughts can like get me wrapped into something that isn't for me.
Mhm.
And I need your wisdom. I need
Yeah.
your counsel. Like
Yeah.
I need you to be present in this part of my life, because it's just so easy to kind of get in that habit of just seeing potential and thinking that it's reality.
Right. Yeah, and we do that a lot. We do it with a lot of things though. We like
Yeah.
go and look at a home, that costs like 100,000. I do this. It's like a home that costs $100,000. And you're like, man, if I throw 100 grand in it or like 150 grand in it,
Yeah. This is
this
what
is
it
what it
could
can
be.
be. But that doesn't work with the relationships. Relationships aren't what, in the housing world they call a flip. You can't look at a relationship based off of what it can be. You have to look at it for what it is, and that's what we do a lot of times. We will go
Mhm.
into a relationship looking at, if we put some TLC on it and
Mhm.
shine it up a little bit, this is what it could be. And man, that's just a recipe for disaster. And I think it happens because we see something about someone that we like.
Yeah.
If you're shallow, it's money. If you're, relatively grounded, then it might be like, oh, I love the way that, they're family centric. They may not be a believer, but they really seem to love family and
Mm.
like they, are very well.
And they don't
Um,
talk
yeah, yeah,
vulgarly
stuff like
or
that.
yeah.
Um, and so we say, well, that's enough for me to work with.
Hmm.
And then we begin creating this false narrative and this false reality in our heads, and we start playing out this string and this
Right. This
series
is
of
what it could
events of
be.
like, okay, it's here now, but over the next 6 or 8 months, we're going to play through this process, and this is where it's going to end up. And then like once we arrive, we can get engaged and get married, and everything's going to be kumbaya and happy, and I'm going to feel
Mm.
great because I just fixed them. And that's not how the real world
No, I
works.
think
There's
that the
there's
danger with
messes.
that is especially when you get 6 to 8 months down the line and you realize that that scenario has not played out in that direction at all. If anything, it's gone the opposite direction. And then you realize that you have all these memories in this time with this person that you may really like a lot. And it's hard to separate yourself from that person at that time because you're comfortable and it's what you got invested into. And so you're like, oh, do I really want to cut this off because I've spent so much
I've
time?
invested so much.
I've invested,
Yeah.
and so I just want to say to the person, if you know that you're in a relationship, I know this is for single people, but technically you're single until you're married.
For tax reasons. Yeah. You are not head of household.
Um, but if you're in a relationship that isn't the right relationship, God has called you higher, or
Or maybe it's just not a fit,
yeah,
you know?
like maybe there are certain things that you've noticed that because you are dating, because you haven't committed your life to them, you can leave. Like that's the part of dating. You get to know each other, you see if anything's going to go further. This is your opportunity here as you're listening to this. Like, decide if this is going in the direction that you had always thought it would. If it is, great. If it's not, do some evaluating. I would always make this list whenever I was single. If I was like taking somebody through the evaluation process, which is
Process.
basically dating, I would write a pros and cons list. And if the cons outweighed the pros, then I would end it. That sounds so
Looks like I made the cut, guys.
That sounds so
Shallow.
shallow. But I mean, the person that you're spending your life with, that's a serious deal.
Yeah.
And I think we understand that even more now that we're several years into marriage and we're like, man, this plays into every day, every
Everything.
action, everything that you decide for yourself, for your kids, for your family, finances, like everything. And so if you're just taking a lighthearted look at dating, maybe ask yourself why. Like, who made it seem like dating is
frivolous.
supposed to be that way? I know it's supposed to be fun and everything, but life isn't always supposed to be about fun, because you can have fun with the person that God has
Well, dude,
set
it's
for
like,
you.
dude, you're my wife. How do we define fun, though? Is like fun getting drunk and like sleeping around and
Well, I
like,
wasn't even going to go there.
well, okay, that's fine. I will. Or is fun, like actually having someone who has integrity and character and like wants to, And when I say love you, I don't mean in like the worldly sense, but like love you in the sense that like, oh, they care for your soul. Oh, they care about deep conversation. Like they really are invested in you and not looking out for their best interest, but for your best interest. Like
Yeah.
I think that's a better picture. Like to me, that sounds a lot more fun than like just being stupid, you know? And making irrational and irresponsible decisions, I
Well,
just
because
don't think is like I just cannot wrap my mind around what is fun about regret.
well, when you get out of the schooling system, I think a part of like high school, college life, all of that, it's what everybody else is
It's
doing.
cultural.
It's cultural. So once you get out of that context and you get a little bit older, you realize, wait, do I really enjoy doing that? Or was I just kind of going along with what everybody else was doing? And if you put the dating scene into that, then everything can kind of get mixed up. And so if you're finding your identity in what you're doing and who you're hanging out with, like, no wonder your dating life is affected by that. But just think about future you and maybe what you would have told yourself as a kid. I love thinking about this from this perspective sometimes. Like, what would Chelsea now tell little Chelsea that's like 5 years old?
That's cute.
You know, you probably wouldn't be proud to tell her, yeah, I went with what everybody else did and just kind of went where the wind took me. But you would be proud to say you had purpose behind every decision that you made and that everything is going to work out, even if there were some things that you couldn't control that were thrown into your life and
Yeah.
God was faithful through it. And
Yeah.
I think that goes to show as well in our
Yeah.
relationships.
I think it all
Um,
boils down to like what's your motivating factor. Because
mhm.
just through life, I've seen a few different things, primarily two different things that motivate people. Um, one being fun, and the
Mhm.
other being purpose. And those are really two of the biggest driving factors for different people, kind of
Yeah.
walking through different spaces and places of life. It's either fun or it's purpose, and I'm sure it's not limited to just those two things.
No.
But I would say a big majority of the population falls in one of those two categories of like what drives them. Um, and I think I'm almost sure that every single person at a point in their life will move from one into the other. So a lot of people, like, they'll begin with purpose and then they'll decide like, ah, this is boring and not really for me, and they'll move into fun. Or they'll be in fun, they'll be so concerned about having fun and just doing everything that's like wanting just need to have fun, just need to have fun. Um, that they're like, man, this isn't what I thought it was going to be,
Mm,
and I actually want to do something purposeful.
yeah.
And the other thing that I just did want to mention is that the two can coexist. I think a lot of times we say like, "Oh, if I'm living a purposeful life, then it must be boring," and
No.
like, and I've found the most joy. I've found the most fun in living a life of purpose. I think it really just goes down to how we define those two things.
Right. I think the surface level version of fun, I've seen play out in people that I know personally. A lot of times, if they're pursuing just that, it's masking something else. Like there might be hurt there or trauma or fill in the blank. And keeping themselves busy helps distract them from what is truly going on underneath the surface. I know we're talking about singleness and dating, but I think this plays into it. If there is something that's being masked by your busyness and your distraction, I think it's okay to pull back and say, I can feel what I need to feel in order to receive healing in this area. If it's in the area of dating, are you pursuing like the fun relationships and just lightheartedly dating because you're afraid of commitment? Or are you afraid of being hurt and maybe getting into a serious relationship because you're kind of supposed to be vulnerable in those contexts, but maybe you've been hurt in the past. So those things are okay to recognize, and it's actually very healing when you let yourself feel those things.
Hmm.
And then you realize my tendencies, like we had said a few weeks ago with, placing fear and
Yeah.
insecurity
Yeah.
on your future relationships and the relationships you have now. This is a huge part of singleness and dating. Truly knowing who you are in all of those spaces plays a huge role in who you'll allow yourself to be associated with and who you'll allow yourself to date.
Mm.
So I think in singleness, like figuring out if there is any of those things in you is worth the journey. So yeah, I would say, like, have you been hurt in the past? Has relationships been hard for you? Because there's a lot to consider and think on.
Yeah.
But it's worth it. It's worth the hard work.
That's good. Yeah, that's
So
wise. I think the last thing that I just wanted to address, maybe to my younger self, as you would put it, is that, and our friend Luke says this a lot, but he often will say singleness is not a disease.
yeah,
And I think that a lot of times,
it's treated that way.
yes, and I want to be sensitive here, but a lot of times people will, with actual illnesses, they will identify often themselves either with that illness or overcoming that illness, and for good reason. It is a
Mm-hmm.
monumental task that I respect so highly for anyone who beats a life-threatening disease. I mean, that is absolutely incredible. It is courageous. It is difficult to overcome. But in the same vein, so in the sense that someone might put in an Instagram bio that they are a cancer survivor, which praise God for that. That is awesome. A lot of times, what people will do is, in the same vein as relationships, they will identify themselves by their relationship status. And I think a lot of times when we do that, we're really walking the line on some dangerous territory because that was never where our identity was supposed to be. That's never where who we are, or what we believe about ourselves was supposed to lie in. And I just don't think that we can ever really hope to have anything successful as far as relationships go if we're constantly only judging our success or our failure based off of if we are single, dating, engaged, or married.
Right. And I think people could view us talking on a podcast from a married perspective as, of course, you're going to say that you're married,
No, but this
like
is one
you.
of the things that I believed and I regretted, and I still regret.
Right. But I would say, even in marriage, we're trying to figure out who we are together
Mm.
and who we are individually, and to get our security from God rather than in each other. There are
Yeah.
certain needs that we have that
Yeah, of course.
we meet with one another, but it's not like you've arrived because you've gotten married. I think in Christian world, that's a very big idol, is actually
Or it's not like you're cured because you've gotten
right.
married. Like, your singleness was a disease and you were sick and like messed up.
Right.
And now that you're married, like, welcome to the club. Like, you're healed.
No, but
You're
I
a
also
survivor. You made it.
don't think it's bad to desire marriage. I think
No.
marriage is a unique reflection of God's glory, but we should desire above all to have God's plans for our life to prevail over our own. And I think whenever we talk about that verse of seek the Lord with all your heart and he will give you the desires of your heart, I think it's seek the Lord above all else, or something along those lines. Don't make me sound like I don't know what I'm talking about. I know that that's similar to the verse.
In the Lord
Trust in the
with
Lord.
all your heart.
Yes.
Lean not on your own understanding.
So
in all your ways acknowledge him.
That's he will make your path straight.
Yes. Proverbs 3.
Right.
5 through 6.
I'm just talking about the desires of your heart.
Oh.
But with that, it first acknowledges that you know God and you desire his desires. And so a lot of people take that verse out of context, saying, because I desire marriage, God's going to give me marriage. Because I desire to be in a relationship, God's going to give me a relationship. But the verse is talking about allowing your desires to align with the desires that God has. And putting that above all is not easy, but it is a call nonetheless from God to do.
Amen.
So the pursuit of that looks the same, but yet different in every season of singleness, engagement, marriage. And some of the most inspiring people to me are those that have continued to be single into their 40s and their 50s. And I believe they have a unique voice to speak to the generation that we find ourselves in. I learned so much from them. So I just don't think that singleness needs to be talked so negatively about,
Yeah.
because there's so much power in it. And Paul talks about just how much more, in a way, powerful like singleness can be, because of just the intimacy you can have with God that's undistracted from family and marriage and the more things that are added to your plate whenever you're married. So yeah, I just wanted to mention that because I think it's important.
I think that's a pretty good overall picture of our thoughts and just like the ways that God has convicted us and the things that we have just maybe picked up along the way, or having time to reflect and have some hindsight on our past and on our time in singleness, maybe some of the things we wish we would have done differently. And yeah, I think for me, my heart in all of this is not to like sound smart or sound like I know better than anyone. My heart is to just remind you that like your singleness isn't a disease. Your singleness is not wasted. Your singleness is not you waiting on God to like deliver the right gal or guy.
Yeah.
It's not this point of like uselessness that you're walking through. I think I felt sometimes like because I was single, I was kind of useless, or that I didn't have the authority that married people had. And that even came across in different opportunities to preach. I got told I couldn't preach until I was married in some places. And so just stuff like that. I think a lot of times we feel inadequate or not as good as people who are married when we're single. And that's just not true. That's just not true at all.
We just hope that you're inspired to just lean into wherever God has you right now. And yeah, we're just grateful for the time that we're in. We're being challenged personally in our marriage in a lot of areas, and we're not.
It's good though. It's
coming
healthy.
here, and acting like we're perfect and that we got it all together. But we're grateful for a place where we can be that way. And
lastly, we just want to say a huge thank you to all of our supporters on Patreon, who support us just for a few bucks a month to do this podcast. You're the reason that we're here. You're the reason that we can come in the studio and create the content that we do. So if you are interested in becoming a patron, you can head over to patreon.com/Nick and Chelsea and click a package there and sign up and become a part of our community.
Yeah, we can't wait to get to know your name and maybe see you on Zoom.
Yes. Yeah. So thank you guys again for the time that you take to listen each week. We're so grateful that we get to speak into your life for just even a few moments. And we can't wait to see you next week.